Ah, well, ye oldie vinyl player. But when you overhaul one of these pieces of vintage kit, or even something much newer, how do you know that the darn thing's running at the right speed? Well, unless you're like my mother was, a accomplished musician, and she had absolute pitches, and she'd know immediately whether one of these was running too fast or too slow, or a cassette was too fast or too slow, what have you. But for most of us mere mortals, that's not an option, including me. I've got a pretty good ear, but I can't always be absolutely sure. An old trick years ago was the stroboscopic disc that you just plonked on the platter and switched the player on. Now, of course, these work best under the old-fashioned lamp bulbs, incandescent bulbs. That's a 100-watt spotlight up there. The eco-Nazis will be after me, I know, won't they? And the thought police too. It works in the same sort of way that, well, sometimes when you were looking at the television westerns years ago and they'd be rattling along in a stagecoach, you'd notice that the wheels appeared to be turning backwards on the stagecoach. And that was because the RPM they were running at was clashing somehow with the number of frames a second that the camera was filming. God, I start to sound like I know what I'm on about, don't I? There, oh dear, yes, avoid that. Christ, they'll have me running the country next. Shit. But you see what I mean. Now, a while ago I had to convert my steampunk record player to belt drive because the idler wheel in there just went to goo. The motorboard, thankfully, was very easy to do. It had cutouts for belt and idler motor mountings, and I thought, bloody hell, that's amazing. So, of course, I went for the belt drive. Now, the only thing was I couldn't be absolutely sure whether the thing was set up right for speed. Then a couple of you got in touch with me, Ben from Leg Old Timers channel and Michael from Agfomatic 91. You both sent me a link, and very nice of you too to do so, to vinylengine.com, and they produce a downloadable and print-offable stroboscopic disc. Now, it's important that you know the electrical supply frequency where you are before you do this. Here in England, it's 50 cycles a second, 50 hertz, as it is in most of Europe. I'm not sure it is in all of Europe actually, but if you're in Japan or Canada or the United States, of course, the frequency will probably be 60 cycles a second. So make sure you get the right one, because it won't work otherwise. It also won't work, very probably, if you try and do it with one of those fancy new low energy labs, because they contain an inverter that runs the fluorescent tube, and the frequency that runs at may well be nowhere near mains frequency. It will be whatever the manufacturer saw fit, and it needs to be at the mains frequency for this thing to work. Now, I've always thought this old Philips, she runs a bit too slow, so we'll see. Now, you probably won't be able to see it on the camera, but I can see it for myself. The outer ring is the 33 and a third ring, and that's what I'm set to. And it appears to be going very, very slowly anti-clockwise, and that means that this is running too slowly. If it was going the other way, it would mean that it was going a wee bit too fast. Now, of course, it's probably too late really to do much about this old girl, because, Philips don't make any audio-visual equipment anymore. It's just a brand name now. They do make medical equipment, so I'm told. I'm sure the scanner I had at the hospital once said Philips on it. But it didn't play cassettes, so it wasn't very good. This is driven by a shaded pole mains motor and an idler drive. So what you've got is what you've got, really. Once you've established that everything is as free running as it can be, then there's not much more you can do. Changing the idler would probably correct it, but of course you can't get the idler wheel anymore. Now, some other Philips kit from this time though you might be able to sort out, because of course the motor used was a DC motor, because they could run on batteries as well, some of these, couldn't they? And the motor was the same one that they used in their old cassette decks. And there was a big old control module with a variable potentiometer, and you just turned it to the left to slow it down, turned it to the right to speed it up. And if you've got a modern turntable with a DC motor in it, you'll find that you can do the same. The way you do it might be different. There may be a separate control module with the pots on it, or the pots may be inside the motor. But it's the same old thing. Turn it to the right to speed it up, to the left to slow it down a bit. So, anyway, having proved that this is a wee bit too slow, I suppose I'll have to try and check out the steampunk one. There's an electronic control on that, so I'll be able to just turn it down or turn it up a bit, just like you can a cassette recorder. If only I still had the pitch tape for that, but alas, I don't. Well, I think it was a tape. I can't remember now. They found a cure for Alzheimer's, but I'll be darned if I can remember where I put it. Bye for now.